I'm Mike Schmidt. I'm Senior Advisor in the Office of the Secretary for Secretary Vilsack at U.S. Department of Agriculture. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to sort of walk through sort of the application process for the Commodity Container Assistance Program. I will give a few high-level comments and some context, and Kelly Dawson, who's the program manager for this program, will walk through the details, and then we will have some time to answer questions. And as you're coming up with questions, please put them in the chat. And unless it's something that's specific to that exact sort of section in the presentation, we'll probably run through the presentation and then address questions at the end. I believe Ria is probably going to collate and sort of help us sort of coordinate on the questions in the chat and keep a running tally there. And then we can open it up after we work through the chat to anyone that wants to raise their hand and have comments. So again, we've been working at USDA with the Department of Transportation and also sort of local entities like the like the Northwest Seaport Alliance to sort of look for opportunities to increase the flow of containers and to reduce sort of the backlog and sort of some of the logistical challenges we've seen post-pandemic with container shipment, especially out of the West Coast. We have a pop-up site, we're calling it, so a temporary sort of site in Oakland, and also we're here to talk about the similar version in Seattle. I think we are working on and hope to have sort of an additional announcement about a Tacoma site that will be similar to the Seattle site. And hopefully in the next few days, we can't officially sort of make that announcement today, but we are working toward that and hope to have sort of more exciting news and another option for shippers and truckers in the Pacific Northwest to sort of have some optionality, especially with some of the return dates and things like that changing so much. So appreciate you joining us. Just want to sort of highlight that we know this isn't a panacea. We're just trying to pilot some things and see if they can work and sort of relieve some pressure. But at the same time, we know that it takes sort of everyone in this system, from the ocean carriers to the shippers to the truckers to importers and exporters, to make the system function better and get back to a place where we aren't having the levels of frustration that we've seen sort of post-pandemic. You may have seen, or if you followed what the Secretary's schedule, he was testifying before the Senate Agriculture Committee last week and mentioned that he had made some calls to some of the major ocean carriers. I think we're up to 5, sort of pressing this issue sort of one-on-one with them, sort of to ask about what are their specific commitments, what are their actions, what are their ideas to help get us to a point where we are serving our agricultural customers, our ag exporters appropriately, and serving you better, so that we can get to a place where we don't have this level of frustration and lots of containers that could have been filled with our exports moving back across empty, which is the core challenge, I think, for at least the West Coast ports. Again, there's also sort of investments in the longer term investments in infrastructure that's more on the Department of Transportation side and the bipartisan infrastructure law and pieces like that. But USDA wanted to step up and do what we could with a flexible authority we had here with the Commodity Credit Corporation to sort of support some of these innovative sort of pop-up facilities to help on those margins. So I will see if Steve from Northwest Seaport Alliance wants to say a few words. They've been a great partner with us as we've developed this, and appreciate sort of this ability to have this federal local sort of partnership.
Sure. Thank you, Mike. Can everyone hear me okay? Again, I'm Steve Belaski. I'm the Director of Business Development at the Northwest Seaport Alliance. And first of all, I would like to acknowledge and say thank you to the U.S. Department of Agriculture for offering this program and for partnering with us on the program and getting involved in the situation to try and help our export community on the ag side. I think as Mike acknowledged, there is no silver bullet in this supply chain situation, and nor is this program going to be a silver bullet, but I believe it's an actionable item that will help with the offsetting of some of the export costs and helping position equipment closer to marine terminals to give them a better chance of making the vessels in our current world where we have shortened receiving windows. So again, nothing's gonna, if I could wave my wand, I could, but as Mike also said, I think it's critical that we all continue to work together. Everyone in the supply chain needs to do their part. And, one could argue that not everyone is at this moment in time. So from the Alliance perspective, ag and export is critically important to our gateway. We are historically very balanced, and we are not that case today. Our numbers are down. And so we are happy to partner with the USDA in this program, and open to partnering with the entire community on things that we can do, actionable things that we can do that, again, may not solve the problem, but I think it will help. So again, thanks to the USDA. And I also want to acknowledge that, Greg Unterbrink of PCMC is on the line as well. And I want to acknowledge PCMC. They have stood up 2 yards in the gateway, one in Seattle, which is available for today's program, and one in Tacoma that we are hoping to bring online to this program in as Mike mentioned. So want to acknowledge their efforts to, again, make the space available in this, you could call it a crisis triage, whatever. So again, we just all need to do what we can do as we maneuver through this. So thank you again for the opportunity, and I'll turn it back to Mike and the team.
Thanks, Steve. And certainly we've had support from Congress as well. We had congressional members sort of out at the port and helping make the announcement. And there's certainly a lot of interest in ocean shipping reform and other things like that. So this is a small part of a bigger picture, and appreciate everyone's work and ideas. And frankly, this is a pilot program for a reason. If there's ways we need to tweak it, if there's other options we want to add to it, we want to hear from that, and we want to be as flexible as we can within the sort of authorities that we have. So this is sort of lightning speed for a federal government actually to sort of stand up a program. It may not seem like that from the outside, but it certainly is. And you got some of the best sort of government folks to be the most flexible in the folks from the Farm Service Agency. This is going to be a program that, if you're familiar with Farm Service Agency, you might be used to the county offices and the state office. We're going to run this a little different. We're going to run this out of headquarters, and Kelly Dawson is our program manager, who's going to be your key contact. And as you work through questions, as you run into sort of things like that, there'll be an email address for you to send those questions, but she'll be one of your key points of contact to work those things through. And we just want to make sure we can make this as smooth, and hopefully this isn't part of your frustrations. You have plenty of frustrations with logistics and the challenges you've seen over since the pandemic. So Kelly, I'll kick it to you to walk through the presentation, and then we'll come back for questions at the end.
Thank you, Mike, and welcome everyone. It's good to hear from you, Steve. I want to assure folks that have called in, this is not the first special program that my division has worked with before. And so our goal overall is to make sure that it's a positive experience for everyone who is going to apply or is inquiring about the program. So to kick it off, this program, the Commodity Container Assistance Program, is intended to restore our shipping and transportation services of U.S. agricultural commodities so that they can be delivered around the world, and also to relieve the supply chain congestion that we are currently experiencing some of our U.S. ports. We have partnered with the Port of Oakland, as well as the Northwest Seaport Alliance of Seattle, and it's very possible that we will be having other ports coming on board in the near future. This partnership is unique to each particular port, and it's vital so that we can make sure we have an efficient delivery of this program. The agreements that are in place are actually with USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service. They're providing funds for non-constructive costs at such ports. For example, in Oakland, they're contributing up to 60% of their startup costs. It can include costs associated with fencing, wiring, refrigeration, plugs for refrigeration units. It can also include equipment for handling and forklifts, what have you. Other similar activities include to facilitate the distribution of the ag products, and it can include chassis rentals to speed the movement of containers.
And just from that previous slide, just want to point out, Seattle did not, Seattle already had the facilities up and ready and available, so we don't have this sort of agreement with Seattle, but we are looking and talking to other ports similar to Oakland, where we're sort of helping with some of this equipment and smaller scale infrastructure can help. Sorry, Kelly.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, the point there is that each agreement is unique to meet that port's needs that may be there. What Ccap will do, and that's how I'll refer to this program from here on out, is it will provide direct payments to agricultural commodity owners who pick up or deliver shipping containers of ag commodities to a designated temporary storage site at approved ports. I want to point out that this program is, as Mike stated, it will be administered by the Farm Service Agency at the national office level. Specifically for the Port of Seattle, payments will be made in $200 per filled dry container and $400 per filled reefer container. The payment of empty pickups of $125, that is specifically related only to the Port of Oakland. It is not being offered or was not requested for the Port of Oakland at this time. The sign-up period for Ccap began yesterday, May 31st, and it will continue through January 31st of 2023. The eligible period that applicants can apply for Ccap is for containers that were delivered retroactively starting March 1st and will continue through December 31 of this year. Applicants can submit their applications either on a monthly basis, or they can do a combination of months, or they can choose to wait until January at the end of the Ccap program period and submit all of their months in total. That's a choice. We're trying to make sure we provide flexibility to the applicants. This is a certification program, meaning that applicants are not required to submit records with their application. However, if it is requested by the agency in writing, the applicant must provide documentation to support that information. We will be coordinating with terminal operators to verify if the applicant is an approved exporter. Applicants should not be submitting duplicate information for a month that has already been previously submitted. If their application needs to be revised, they can then, and it has already been paid for, they would be required to submit supporting documentation, and that information would need to be provided to FSA no later than January 31 of 2023. So for example, should they submit an application for the months of March, April, and May, and then later on their documentation shows that they actually overlooked additional containers that should have been included for the month of May, they can revise that application provided they submit supporting documentation such as a bill of lading indicating the missing containers. And we will make a corrected payment to address those if the documentation supports that. So who's eligible to apply? Eligible applicants include the owner of the U.S. agricultural commodities. We define that as business or an entity, which can include cooperatives or a handler, company, and an exporter. It's that particular person who's liable for and has ownership of the ag commodity that's in transit. They can also be a designated agent, meaning somebody that has explicit written permission from the owner of the ag commodity to represent them on their behalf. USDA will not be splitting Ccap payments. If a designated agent is representing more than one owner of the ag commodities in a claim shipping container, they will be responsible for dispersing those funds to the applicable owners based upon their bill of lading. Any dispute that there may be between the owner of the ag commodities and the designated agent is considered a civil matter, and USDA will not be responsible for resolving it. All applicants must complete Form FSA 862. That's the Commodity Container Assistance Program application. This application can be found on our farmers.gov/CCAP website. Once the application is completed and signed by the ag owner or by the designated agent, it's to be scanned and uploaded to the email address that can be found in the lower right-hand corner of the application form. This email address is also available at the farmers.gov/CCAP website. This is an example of the Ccap application. Parts A, B, and C must be completed by the applicant in order to be considered a complete application. Part A includes the applicant's name, their address, their contact phone number, and then a unique entity ID. For exporters who already are conducting business with our ag marketing service or AMS, be it through a school lunch program or some other sort of procurement program, if they already are registered in sam.gov, they're to use the same UEI that they do under that program. There will not be a need for them to register under a different UEI. Then they should also include a contact name. If the address of the contact individual is different from the applicant, they need to include that, as well as a phone number if that number is different from the applicant's. The email address must also be included. This is the same email address that the applicant is to use for each subsequent application that they submit. They cannot use a different email address for subsequent applications. Part B is where the applicant will enter the claimed number and type of containers that are delivered to the temporary site, and it's separated by filled containers and filled reefers. They're to indicate in whole numbers the number of containers that are delivered for each month that they designate in their application. We would anticipate the first set of applications to only have the months of March, April, and May included. They can certainly hold off to a later period if they choose. It's not required, but we would like to see that we get them in on a consistent basis, on a monthly basis. They also, as I stated before, could wait until January and submit it all in total at one time. The last item is Part C, and that is the applicant certification statement, stating that they are reporting to the best of their ability that the information is true, accurate, and correct. They also are agreeing that upon written request from the agency that they will provide supporting documentation if necessary. That last item must be signed by the applicant and indicate if they're representing, if it's a designated agent, their representative capacity, and date it. Then they are to scan it and upload it to the email address. As I stated before, will be located in the lower left of this application form, and that form is available on our farmers.gov/CCAP website. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Peter so he can address the sam.gov registration for applicants who may not have a UEI at this time.
As Kelly noted, in item 6 of the application form that on the previous slide, you need to provide a unique entity ID. This comes from registering at sam.gov, the federal system for awards. The unique entity ID is necessary to receive federal assistance and participate in the program. You may already have a unique entity ID if you've applied for federal assistance before. If you don't have one, we encourage you to start your registration with SAM.gov soon. The validation process can take up to 10 business days. In this slide deck, which we'll send after the webinar, we include a link to a checklist which walks through the steps in the process. The key is to follow the instructions as best you can and to hang in there. The homepage to SAM.gov also has answers to frequently asked questions. In addition, the Federal Service Desk is available by phone and has a live chat if you get stuck or have additional questions.
I want to remind folks once again that if they do not have a UEI, as Peter addressed, go register. However, I don't want to discourage folks from submitting an application without the UEI. They certainly can do that. However, their payment will be delayed. We cannot make a payment without a UEI. So we will make sure that if it's missing, that we are following up in writing with the applicant to obtain that. Now, this is an important slide to note that if FSA determines the applicant has misrepresented the number or the type of shipping containers, or if the owner is misrepresented by someone acting as a designated agent, the application will be disapproved and a refund will be required and paid in full plus interest from the date of disbursement. Such notification would be submitted in writing to the applicant of record. Any refunds that are to be resolved will be done in according to USDA regulations found at 7 CFR Part 3. And as well, any refund that is owed, that will also be followed up in writing. And that's the overall presentation. It's pretty simple, straightforward program. If you haven't already looked at our farmers.gov/CCAP website, I strongly encourage you to do that. As I stated, we have the form. We also have a list of eligible commodities and ineligible commodities, frequently asked questions. That's also where you can find the notice of funding availability, which spells out the specifics of the program. So we strongly encourage you to take a look at that. And the email address I was referring to submit the application is sm.pac.fsa.ccap@usda.gov. That's also the same email address that you can use to submit any questions or concerns that you have, and I will assure you that we will respond to your inquiries within 24 hours. At this time, we're going to go ahead and open it up to questions, unless somebody here in our group at USDA can point out anything I may have overlooked at this time.
No, Kelly, I think you covered it. I don't think we have many questions from the chat. Rio, is there anything that you think we should pull out of that? I think there's a question of whether whether Tacoma is covered now. So the Tacoma pop-up site is not yet approved. We are hoping and working through whether we can expand it. There isn't a requirement though. So if it makes sense for you to pre-position, and pre-positioning in Seattle still gets you closer than your current location, you could start by using the Seattle site, and if and when sort of Tacoma is added as a option, then that will be announced. That will be on our website, and we'll be able to do that in fairly short order, I believe, after we get approval. Any other flags? Otherwise, I think there's a raise hand function, etc., and we can take questions from the audience.
Yeah, I was just going to flag, I think most of the questions in the chat are logistics focused, so we'll defer to the port on or to Northwest Seaport Alliance on some of those pieces, but we do have the option to just have folks ask questions directly here.
So Greg or Steve, I think we saw there's a question in here about which ocean carriers are participating, or does it matter if an ocean carrier is participating? If you want to pre-position a container, do you need that permission from an ocean carrier? And then any other logistical things that you may want to flag, gate hours, whether there's been a wait at any of the gates, that sort of thing.
Thank you again for the opportunity. My name is Greg and I'm break with PCMC. And so we are running one of the pop-up yards at T46. I know the question was asked about what carriers are calling there. It varies time to time. We are a stopgap for some of the ocean carriers. So when their terminals are full, they'll come over to our place. So we currently have CMA, YML, ZIM, MSC, ONE, Hapag Lloyd. We basically have almost all of them except for Evergreen. Some of these, and depending how it's set up, we have some contracts directly with the ocean carriers, and we do have some contracts with some exporters or BCOs. So that would be something that you could probably address with the steamship line initially. And then you could also come to us for individual accounts. Typically our hours are from, we open the gate at 7 o'clock and we close the gates about 4:20 to make sure that everybody is take service before 5 o'clock.
And Greg, there's no, I think in terms of which ocean carriers, all ocean carriers are eligible to use this program. Just to be clear, the key is though that ocean carrier needs to have a contract with PCMC to use Terminal 46. So just wanted to make that clarification. So if the ocean carrier has a question, we would encourage you to have them reach out directly to Greg or someone at PCMC to establish a program there or a contract there.
Okay, other questions? You can raise your hand, or if you're on the phone, you can jump in if there's a pause.
Steve made this a question for you. So if CMA is a participating carrier with PCMC, then we're responsible for, if we wanted to drop containers into that yard empties, we would need to get containers released from whatever, let's say T5 with CMA, and have our drayman pick them up and drop them in the yard and then pick them up as we need them. Is that how that works?
Well, I'll let the folks from USDA weigh in, but the program is really, reimbursements are eligible for loaded export containers that are positioned at T46 prior to exporting on a ship. So I don't know that it's applicable for empty containers that are staged at T46. I don't believe so, but I defer to others on that if that is indeed the question.
Okay, maybe I can clarify that. So if we grab a container from CMA and they allow us to pick it up early, then we can turn it back into T46 ahead of time, which we would be eligible to get the value back, or at least the $400 back for a refrigerated container. But at that point, we need to get, let's say the ship is calling, all of a sudden calls Tacoma rather than Seattle because they've moved it. Okay. Who moves the container from T46 down to the T5, or whether it's down to Husky or wherever the ship may be calling?
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, that would be for the shipper. Yes.
Okay. So we need to move it again. We need to provide that extra dray out of T46 to whatever site may be loading it.
That's correct, and that's what these funds are intended to offset. That cost is positioning the load from T46 to the marine terminal. That's the intent of this program, is to help with that cost. We realize it doesn't cover the full cost, and we can look at that, but that's the intention of the program. So yes, you could stage the export load there, and if it ends up going on a ship out of Tacoma, I believe it would still be eligible because you've used T46 to position the load.
That's right. So if you use T46 and it's an agricultural commodity, and you store sort of that commodity for a short period of time there in a filled container, whether it's a reefer, if it's a reefer, it's $400, flat amount. If it's dry, it's $200. And we are agnostic to whether it's moving out of Seattle or Tacoma. Any other questions? Go ahead.
There's one question here. It's directed more towards the terminal operators. It said, does this mean the carriers will be waiving the detention charges, or are the payments only designed to offset the detention charges?
We've designed the program to at least assist with that extra dray, that extra pickup. We certainly have been talking to ocean carriers and trying to get them to be flexible and encouraging them to be flexible and be less apt to charge some of those charges. But we can't control it, and this isn't necessarily trying to make you whole, or even requiring you to keep track of how much the dray cost or how much other fees cost. So hopefully that helps answer the question. We tried to make it relatively simple and straightforward. And again, it's a pilot, so we're trying to learn from this and see if are those amounts the right amounts, or is there more that's needed. And we certainly, especially if there's charges being applied that you think are unfair, that are not based on something in your control, but are based on something in the carrier's control. Happy to hear those stories too, because we're trying to think about this whole ecosystem, for lack of a better word, and think about, are there other things that we should be thinking about or asking about as we talk to the ocean carriers and others.
Another question that might be helpful for folks, does Ccap apply to containers returning to any terminal or just some designated terminals?
So again, it is using this specific site, the specific terminal. If it's just returning to, the regular export terminals, there, I would assume not be the extra dray charge. So it's trying to assist shippers to pre-position loads so that with the narrow windows for delivery and changing windows, they can have their products closer to the port and hopefully actually make the vessel. Is sort of the concept that we're testing here. So it does have to be that specific terminal. It's terminal 46, is that right?
Correct, terminal 46 in Seattle, and then hopefully our what we call the West Alvis yard in Tacoma in the near future.
Oh. And that will be part of, frankly, how we verify that your application is accurate. Is we're going to work with the terminal operator to sort of get a list of the containers that have used it for this pre-positioning and storage, and we'll cross-reference that list to serve the applicants.
We'll have that information on our website. I see the other question about where can we find the list of the terminals in Oakland and SeaTac. In Oakland, it's the Howard terminal, and right now it's that terminal 46 in Seattle. So those are the two terminals we're working with right now. And as others have mentioned, we're certainly open to expanding and having those conversations and going through the internal clearance required to add additional sites.
Other questions? Otherwise, we can end a little bit early. And again, there's the email address at the bottom of the page here for questions about the federal program. I believe there's some email addresses in the chat. And if it's more about the local logistics or terminal logistics at T46, it'd probably be best to sort of get with the terminal operator or Northwest Seaport Alliance. But certainly, as you have further questions, other ideas, frankly, we want this to be a conversation and a dialogue. And as things go, hopefully successful, but if there's ways we can tweak it, we want to work with our local partners and make this program hopefully something that's fairly seamless for you and at least addresses some of the issues that you're facing. Again, looking for other combination of impacts if you have some further ideas as well.
This is Kelly Dost again. I want to strongly encourage those who are participating to please take a look at the website, farmers.gov/CCAP. It has a number of resources in addition to the form. Also take a look at our frequently asked questions. That's where you can find the specific location of the terminals And there's also a listing, as I stated before, of eligible commodities and ineligible commodities. And should anyone need assistance with completing an application form, please reach out to us at the designated email address. We're happy to help you.
Okay, certainly there may be, maybe news on Tacoma in the short term. We're speaking with other ports as well. So if there's other ports that you think could use this and you want to give us some leads or encourage them to sort of reach out to us, we certainly, this isn't limited. Currently it's the West Coast ports, but we're talking to Gulfport and sort of East Coast ports as well, about how we can help with the entire system, since it is a crunch, probably more severe in the West Coast, but certainly looking to help with containerized transportation as we work on sort of some of the longer term infrastructure investments, and also sort of addressing some of the competition challenges that we have with and service challenges we have with within the whole system. So appreciate it. And if there's nothing else, we'll please be in touch. Please contact us as you have questions.